Welcome to the Debt Matters Podcast, where we help Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay. In today's show, we're going to talk about credit ratings and how it works. How important is the credit report? What's the difference between a credit report and a credit score? How do you find these things out? And what do you do to improve your credit score, and kind of what are the numbers that maybe you should be going for? My guest today is Jillian Taylor-Mancusi from LC Taylor Licensed Insolvency Trustee with offices in Winnipeg and Kenora. Hi, Jillian. Welcome back.
Hi, Wayne.
It's always a pleasure, and we get into these great discussions. And today, I'm looking forward into this deep dive of credit ratings. So first off, let's talk about like a credit report. What is that?
So if we back up a little, talk about why we need a credit report and what a credit report is, we have to look at why a financial institution would even look at a credit report. And that would be because financial institutions are in the business of risk management. So basically, they make money by loaning money and charging interest rates on the loan. Mm-hmm. Now, the trick for the financial institution is to balance between the need to loan money and the risk that some of that money may never be paid back. So, for example, there are some clients that would never default on a loan, while on the other hand, there are some that will. And there's really two kinds of lenders. Conservative lenders, which is like your bank or your credit union, and they really keep the risk at a minimum and have really strict borrowing criteria, versus a high-risk lender at the other end of the spectrum. And they're prepared to take a little bit more risk. So maybe you have a lower income, or you don't have any security or collateral that you can offer to the loan, or you don't have steady employment. And really, the difference between the two is the interest rate that you're going to get. So with a conservative lender, you might end up with like a 10 or 11% interest rate. Whereas with a high risk lender, you might end up at, 35 or 36%.
Whoa. His name is Vinny, and he works in an alley by the sounds of things. 35%.
Yeah.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
there's more than a few of those around.
Yeah. Oh, my. Good grief. That terrifies me. Just the thought of that.
So what the credit report is going to do is it's going to tell your financial institution how much of a risk you are.
Ah.
So, and the credit bureau reports your credit history in two ways. The credit report, which is like a snapshot of your credit history. And that's where you get that rating system between 1 and 9. And they usually have a letter in front of them, like an I, which means an installment or a car loan, or an O, which is like a line of credit, an open credit, or an R, which is a revolving credit, like a credit card. And you get between 0 and 9, whereas, a 0 means it's too new, you haven't really used it. Or an R1, which means you have a great credit report and you pay within 30 days, you're not more than a payment behind. And then it can go to like a 2, where you're between 30 and 60 days past due, but you're not more than 2 payments behind. And then it can really start to go down from there, where, an R5, you're over 120 days overdue, or an R7, which is like a settlement, or an R8, which is a repossession, all the way down to a 9, which is a bad debt. And a bad debt can include things like bankruptcies, judgments, garnishments, or even if you moved and you never gave them a forwarding address, that can give you an R9.
Okay. So
now,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I didn't realize that. I didn't understand credit report versus credit score, which you're going to explain later. But okay, so R9 bad, R1 good.
Right, exactly. And you have to remember that not all places are going to report. So like your utility bills, they won't report. Or things like your cell phone bill, they'll only report a late payment. They won't report your good payments.
And credit cards?
Credit cards will report, and that's the R, which is like a revolving credit. Okay. And the R1 to R9 really is how late you are in paying. So you don't want to pay late, because the later you are, the lower the higher your number will get. So like if you are 120 days due, well, then you're going to get an R4. If you are over 120 days, you're an R5. And there are no R6s. So once you get past the R5, you start to get into settlements and repossessions and bad debts.
Who sees this credit report? Can I see it?
Yes, definitely.
Really?
Well, your own credit report.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So there's two kinds of of looking at your credit score, if you will.
Right.
A hard hit, which is like if you're going to apply for a credit card or a loan, versus a soft hit when you're checking your own score.
Okay. I actually
leads us into a credit score.
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to know. I thought before we jump into that, difference between a credit report and a credit score, now I've learned. So the credit score is what?
That's also called like a FICO score or a Beacon score. And that's the scale that people see between 300 and 900.
Yes.
So if you have, a 300 to a 559, you have a poor credit score. And that goes all the way up to 760 and higher, which is an excellent credit score. And that's where those hard hits and soft hits affect it. Because if you have a lot of hard hits against your credit score, well, that's going to affect your credit score and start giving you bad marks. Whereas the soft hits, when you're checking your own credit score, it doesn't affect your credit score at all.
Okay. Now explain that a little bit more. Now that I know what the credit score is different than the credit report, hard hit, soft hit, meaning soft is when you check your own credit rating out?
Right. And a hard hit is when you're applying for credit. Now, again, they're looking at the whole idea of risk management. So with a credit score, the higher your score, the lower the risk you are. Mm-hmm. And there's different things that affect it. And again, it's a formula-based procedure where it's based on things like credit history, how much you owe, the length of your credit history, whether or not you have new credit, what kind of credit you have. And it's also interesting, here's a little tip, that your mortgage payments will appear on your credit report, but they won't affect your credit score.
Oh, wow.
So there's a little tip.
Yeah.
Now, and I also have another tip, actually.
Yes.
If you're shopping around for, the best mortgage rate, or you want a really good deal on a car, every one of those is going to be a hard hit, right? So if you decide that you want to look for the best deal on your new car loan, try and do it within a 2-week period, because all inquiries that are made on that car loan or on a mortgage that are made in that 2-week period are usually treated as a single inquiry or a single hit.
Mm. Okay.
So, the credit institution can tell that you're looking around for the best deal, not that you're really trying to get more credit for whatever reason.
So I actually know of people, not just one, but I know of a few different people who have always just kind of paid cash for things, and they take care of all of their payments, and they've even, houses are like almost paid off, bought their cars cash, and they have poor credit scores. And It turns out they're missing one key thing that is really important, and that is credit cards. I had no idea how important a credit card is.
Right, exactly, because you're not, those people that are paying cash, which is great for their own finances, is not good for their credit rating or their credit score. Now, if they're, the kind of person that can just walk into their local bank or their local credit union and apply for a loan, and they know that they know them because that's the way credit unions and such work, not likely a problem, right? They know Joe Smith has a great financial record, great history, great assets. But if they're going to apply to a big bank or for a loan through somebody they don't know, well, they're not likely to get it because they're going to have a poor credit score.
And that's exactly what happened. They'd applied for something, a credit card, or I think it was one of the store credit cards, and got declined because they said, "I'm sorry, you just don't have any credit for us to really gauge this on." And so, what's the best way for you to go about building your credit score?
As much as I don't like saying that, because I'm a licensed insolvency trustee, getting a credit card.
Yeah.
Now, if you're somebody that doesn't do well with credit, because there's people like that, they don't really get that you have to pay it back. You might want to do something like get a secured credit card. Now, what that is, it's like a debit card because you put your own money on it. But as soon as you make a purchase, it's an instant repayment, and it will report to the credit bureau the same way as a regular credit card would.
Okay.
But you never actually owe because it's your own money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good way to start to build a credit score, because it's a really easy way to use a credit card.
And if you do find out that your credit score is low, how do you go about kind of improving it?
Well, there are things you can do, like don't pay your bills late, because like we talked about earlier, it's going to, every time you're late, you get a bad mark on your credit report. You can reduce the amount of debt you have, because the lower your total indebtedness, the better credit risk you are. You also want to make sure that you keep your credit cards down and you don't use one to pay the others, because that's kiting and that becomes obvious to the lenders that you don't want to do that. And like we said earlier about the hard hits, don't make frequent credit applications, because it's going to negatively reflect your credit score.
Is there a number you need to keep it below every year? Because every time I go to a store, some store is offering me a credit card that if I sign up for this thing, I'm going to get 20% off. To which I'm continually saying, no thanks, I'd prefer to pay 20% extra.
Right. And really, that's the answer. No, thank you.
Okay.
Because you don't want to have too many hits on your credit report. You don't want to carry too many credit cards, because even if you don't use them all, it shows how much of a limit you have.
Right.
So you have that available credit. So if things are going poorly and you end up going down the wrong path, you have a lot of available credit there. And that doesn't look good to the financial institution either.
Is it bad to cancel a credit card?
No.
Oh.
Because, well, yes and no. Like, you want to have some credit cards around so that you can have a credit report. But you have to look beyond just the credit report. Like I said, there's some people who just don't do well with credit cards. And it's or they have a spending habit or an addiction problem. So sometimes you have to look beyond the credit card and see, is this too much of a risk for me to have this credit card?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, say no and cancel it.
But for myself, there was a credit card. Like, we don't use our credit cards very much, just for some points. But for the most part, never ever use a credit card. So we had, 2 different ones or 3 different ones. And I was like, we don't even use these. Why don't we just get rid of this one that we never go into this bank at all? And somebody said, oh, you can't do that. Your credit score will go down. So that's why I asked that question. But it's okay. I canceled it anyway. I'm totally fine. I didn't need it. When you talk
you have to remember, credit scores and credit reports are only important if you want credit.
Right.
So if you already have, your mortgage and a vehicle loan and you don't need any credit, well, then it doesn't really matter what your credit rating says anyhow.
Well, and how do we find out our credit score?
Well, in Canada, there's 2 credit bureaus. One is called Equifax and one is called TransUnion, and they can both provide you with your credit reports and your credit scores. Now, you can do it by getting it through the mail, or you can do it on the internet. Now, it's important to know that how you do it will depend on what you get. So if you get your credit report through the mail, you're only going to get the credit report. You won't get the credit score. Now, if you go on the internet and apply for it, you can get both the credit report and the credit score.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Equifax and TransUnion, the 2 in Canada. So it's totally safe to go online, because I've seen some of these things where it says, hey, check your credit score. And I've always avoided them because I'm worried some way, somehow that, somebody will get some information from me.
Actually, it's a good idea to look at your credit report periodically, just to make sure, there's no errors, they don't have the wrong address, or your name is misspelt. You don't want to be applying for, a mortgage or a car loan and find out that you got rejected because your name was spelled wrong on the credit bureau. Mm-hmm. And the other thing you want to check is to make sure that you haven't been a victim of any identity theft. So are all the hits that are on there from you, or is somebody else using your identity and affecting your credit?
Yikes. Well, that's terrifying. How often can you do this? Can you check it like every year?
Oh, definitely. And like I said, it doesn't affect your credit score if you do it yourself. Okay. So if you did it every 6 months or every year, then you can make sure that there's nobody applying for credit on your behalf, or someone hasn't stolen your identity.
Right. Okay. And here's another question for you. Helping our young people build their credits. We have early 20s kids going off to school, and what should we do for them to help them build great credit? There's
a few things that they can do. One of my favorite things is to encourage your children to get RRSPs. Now, there's a few things that an RRSP will do. Is it's going to show the financial institution that they deal with that they can have a pattern of savings. So I know with my daughter, she gets, $50 a month taken off right out of her bank account and puts it away for her retirement. If, for example, they earn a lot of money, having some of that money taken off and put into an RSP is good because it'll lower their taxable income and it can lower the amount of money that they owe at tax time, which is another thing my daughter has just learned about. Even though they might not understand that, saving for retirement is important, she does understand that it lowers the amount of tax she has to pay the government.
Right. I just show them that final number when we play with the compound interest calculator. And I always talk about that on the show. Show them that number in 40 years and go, look at what it can be.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So if they start early, they can retire with a pretty good bank account.
So RRSP, also I would assume tax-free savings accounts, that works as well. TFSAs, yes. And what about getting them a credit card and letting them use credit cards?
Yes, as long as you explain to them how a credit card works. Again, my daughter has a credit card with a very low limit, and she pays it off every month. And she understands that you have to pay it off every month because compound interest kicks in and you start paying a lot more money for things that you don't pay off. So teaching them at a young age how these things work really influences how they're going to grow and how they're going to deal with things as they develop and become, responsible adults.
Anytime you can teach our kids better spending habits, it's something that will pay dividends to them in the future.
Yeah, exactly. It's not too early to start when they're, kids like under 10 even, things like earning money from doing chores. And we would always joke that, you get a chocolate bar and part of that goes to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, and that's the tax. So there are little ways of doing that are kind of fun as well, but they remember.
I love it. Any final words of advice?
No, just remember, you want to check it every once in a while, and you can do things like don't pay your bills late, keep your credit cards down, reduce the amount of debt you have. And it can be important for things like future ability to borrow money or applying for a job or a rental application.
Yes. Thank you very much. This has been a great show.
Thank you.
You got it. Always a pleasure chatting. Jillian Taylor-Mancusi. And to learn more, you can schedule that free consultation with LC Taylor, Licensed Insolvency Trustee at the website lctaylor.com. That's it for today's Debt Matters podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. Thanks for listening.